That is, that's routine. That's basic stuff for Hikaru, who just put the pressure on from start to finish. It was a positional, maneuvering game, but it ended in a tactical flourish.
3 games, 3 decisive results.
This is going to be an exciting one, and all with the white pieces as well, in a very similar style. When these players get their position, they can apply the pressure so well.
Denis changing it up. He won with the English. Are you surprised the next game doesn't go back to the English? He's playing the London?
I am, but one thing I will say is I tend to view the 5+1 portion a little bit as an opportunity for these players to feel out what different openings they have that he might have prepared to try. Remember, this isn't him maybe going back to something like his Catalan. You know, this is also something a little bit fresh. So he's probably just looking to test a few things out and hopefully stick with what works.
Yeah, I'm curious if the players make some adjustments. Maybe, you know, we're seeing white win every game, you know, get comfortable. What kind of adjustments are going to be made? As you said, it's a bit of a feeling out portion, the 5-1.
Yeah, this Jobava London.
I'm not too familiar with like knight c3 delayed like this. It looks a little awkward.
Usually the knight on f3 would actually be back on g1, and you rush to play bishop f4 and knight c3. In this case, it's kind of a mix of all the different ways that you can play the London. But still, one thing that comes to mind early is a move like d5. So should it be white's turn, I would actually want to push that pawn forward. And that makes me think for black that you'd want to capture or play the move d5. In this case, something quite unique, capturing on d4 and then playing knight h5 actually seems really weird to play this way, because why would you allow the bishop to have the e3, d2, and c1 squares? But this is an idea that is deeply rooted in the London. So actually, not that unusual. You want to kick the bishop away so you earn bishop d6 for yourself. And then, in some cases, you just retreat the knight back. That's the purpose of knight h5. Kick the bishop, take the diagonal, and then back you go.
I'm used to those positions, but the knight's still not on c3 there, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
This is the knight that looks a little funny to me, but
exactly
I'm not a London
right.
player.
The knight on h5 it's also on a square that the queen is eyeballing. So it feels very risky, but definitely a position that I think the players have seen before in concept, maybe just not specifically.
I'm used to maybe knight e5, this type of idea, trying to induce knight e5. And after de5, the knight on h5 doesn't have any good squares. It's loose. You have to play g6.
Yep.
But then that weakens all the dark squares.
Yeah, g6. You have g4. You can kick the knight back to g7. And
g7's not a good square for the knight.
You do not want to fianchetto your knights, ladies and gentlemen. That square is for the bishop. So having a look here is Denis. Is he going to go with knight e5, sort of more standard reaction? Instead, bishop b5, and what could be to take and voluntarily play knight e5. But black just plays knight f6 after that.
Well, I think based on the time spent, Denis is out of book. Maybe both players are. Bit of unfamiliar territory. And since it's not his main weapon, he won't be as familiar with some of the side positions. So the players are definitely a little, you know, playing on their own, coming up with ideas. You'd like to maybe take away this knight and put your knight on e5. I'm just not sure how effective that is.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like too much, although after the move a6, you're kind of encouraged to do so. Still, I may bring that bishop back. If you go bishop d3, knight b4, I would continue to keep that bishop with bishop e2. So hanging on to this light squared bishop, if you're going to do it, you got to make the decision now. I don't think that bishop a4 is where you want to go.
But what's the pressure for white here? Because black is just a couple moves away from, you know, bishop d6, knight f6, and it's just a very solid center. I just don't see the pressure.
Well, as white, I would probably be interested in knight e5 and f4. We haven't really been able to achieve that just yet. You know, and doing that without my light squared bishop feels a lot worse. So ideally, I would like to have brought, you know, the knight into e5, play f4 before things, you know, got developed. Like now the bishop's on d7, so you kind of have to take bishop d3, like you mentioned. Black would play bishop d6.
Yeah, but he just took on c6, probably felt like he was too slow to just bring the bishop back. He's played queen f3 here, but this really feels okay for black.
I think so. There's not going to be anything too dangerous. Usually the queen tends to make an appearance perhaps on g3, put a little bit of pressure on the g7 pawn, and if you castle, you have to think twice about a move like bishop h6 with that queen on g3 pinning the pawn.
This will be interesting to see play out because Denis is not much of an e4 player, and this is a bit like a Caro-Kann structure. And, well, probably a bad version of that for white, because if you're looking at the position, black has the bishop pair, black might have the semi-open c-file, and white's making natural moves, rook d1, but there's nothing to attack. And in the long run, I'm seeing some pressure that black can generate on the c-file.
Yeah, if you play... Well,
because of this knight on c3. This knight on c3 is very awkward.
Well, if you trade, let's say, on d7, and then the queen takes and you play knight e2, then a knowing move can be bishop to a4, right? Bishop to a4, you put pressure on c2, you can't push the pawn, you can play b3, but all of a sudden, black just takes a step back, and you've got a3 hanging, c2 hanging. This is not a position that Denis will find success with.
No, I think slowly but surely, black is, white had the lead in development. That hasn't led to anything because look at white's pieces. You can have the lead in development, but if your knight's on c3, d3, and your bishop is on e3, just staring at your own pawn. Those aren't good pieces.
Well, the London is really characterized, most people think the London's characterized by the dark squared bishop, the London bishop, but I think it's actually characterized by the light squared bishop. Having it on the board, it is the best piece based on the pawn structure, and it's just completely missing here. So I'm looking at this and just feeling that Hikaru has to be very happy with what he's accomplished, and in terms of the games we've seen thus far, it's probably one of the best positions that the black pieces have had.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the best, and it's really not a position I'm used to seeing Denis play. Thought it might be outside of his comfort zone. The way it's going definitely is. What would you like to play as white? Well, you're not really in a position to attack on the queen side. There's no targets. By playing queen f3, I'd love a position where I could play maybe h4, h5, h6, loosen up these squares, but h4 will just be picked off. And so what type of exchange is white looking for in this position? Trading off the dark squared bishops. That would give more control over c5 and e5, which white has control over, and the fact that the bishop on c6 hasn't really activated yet. So the good bishop for black is the bishop on f6, targeting f6, trying to find a way to trade that off. Maybe that's knight f4, knight h5. Have to come up with something better than how things are right now.
And deep in thought.
Maybe queen g3. I like queen g3. Bit prophylactic. It's on a dark square, controls e5 a little bit, but I would like to migrate the pieces over to the king side.
Yeah, queen g4 is a very similar idea. I think in concept, pretty much identical. There's not a lot of threats that I can envision without that knight on c3 move, because you want to move the knight on c3 and play pawn to c3. The knight on d3, surprisingly, is actually very well placed, but I'm annoyed constantly by knight e2, bishop a4. That is such a good reaction to that move, and it's preventing me from playing knight e2, playing c3, bringing that knight to f4, to h5. I can see the potential, but I just can't make the first move happen. So, Eric, I almost think about a move like rook c1 just to play knight e2.
No, I'm running out of productive moves, so whether it's rook c1, maybe now's the time to play h3. I know it doesn't do too much besides, give your king some space, but hard to find productive moves.
We're at that point where we're looking for h3.
Black's playing rook e8, and you might be wondering, is e5 in the cards? Generally not, because black will then be straddled with an isolated pawn, but there could be some positions where it's an idea to open up the bishops. Ideally, you do it without giving white counterplay, and an isolated pawn would be counterplay.
And rook d2, we should point out, same idea, I think, to rook c1, wants to guard the c2 pawn so that this knight can finally move from c3. It's ironic, you put that knight there so early in the game, it had some threats early on, but you want to actually move it, connect those pawns with c3, eliminate any problems on the queen side, and finally make some threats on the king side.
Yeah, the knight on c3 just can't go anywhere, right? b5, a4, e4, every square is covered, so you simply do need to reroute it, and as you mentioned, take care of c2. The question is, Hikaru now is probably thinking, this is a big think, because he's envisioning this knight rerouting, wants to stop it, right? And I think he was calculating e5.
That's right. Yeah, e5 was, clearly set up by rook e8. Not forced, it's always going to be there. The move knight b6 in concept makes good sense. Knight c4 is a really, really strong idea. And so strong, actually, that rook d2 has just been undone completely. And still, I'm wondering about this knight c3. I'm almost getting to the point where I feel like if the knight c3 can successfully retreat, it's like a huge win for Denis, a massive achievement here.
By the way, the players are in early time trouble. They're in time trouble right from the opening. So You're seeing the tempo pick up here. Trades are happening. You can't spend too much time on any moves. Denis looking to trade and simplify. He's a very practical player.
Okay, some small achievements here. It looks like knight c5 will be played, but Hikaru is matching the maneuvering,
C5.
and c5 is key.
Opens up this bishop, opens up the c-file, and again, the issue for Denis is he doesn't have any counterplay, and Hikaru is very strong when he's just given the initiative.
Yeah, so c4 was played
That
for
was a great find.
exactly that reason, taking advantage of the pin on the d file. Still, it feels like that b pawn backwards on the open file. I do think that this position is very, very equal. If it goes to a pure bishop endgame, that could favor Denis.
Pure bishop endgame, as you said, favors Denis, maybe because the pawn is on a5. That can be targeted by the bishop, and none of his pawns can be targeted here.
Exactly.
I think Hikaru wants to keep the queens on the board. That's what he's indicating.
Yeah, after pawn takes d5, queen d1. Here, the d pawn actually will be more dangerous.
Queen d5, d3. I like black's position.
But you
so
have to have the queens on.
Yes.
That's why queen f3 was played. It looks terrible to allow these doubled pawns, but that's why the queen trade was actually rejected by Hikaru.
Is there perpetual here?
Well, is there more? Queen takes a5.
Well, I feel like there's not more because black always has this d pawn, which should be enough counterplay, and I always take that advanced pawn over the extra material. But okay, here we go. Another perpetual opportunity.
Yeah, it's always there, so you can
G6.
consider. Now it's Hikaru that wants to play on.
Yes. Oh, g3 can't be right. That opens up the dark squared bishop. The king is a lot weaker here.
Keeping the material on the board. Bishop d4 can come in. The
Black
d-pawn
wants
is
to bring
scarier.
that bishop in, yes.
The d-pawn is advanced, much more difficult to deal with.
King h2, queen a2 on the board.
Oh, it looks like, okay, queen f3, bishop to f4. No, Hikaru's made some big progress here.
There's no perpetual for Denis. He's looking for perpetual.
Oh my goodness. Hang
King
on a
h2,
second.
is there a mate?
There's queen h6, but it's not anything. The king just
Check.
goes to g8.
There's no perpetual, no.
And the
F7's
a-pawn will be
covered.
caught.
There was so much that just happened there.
The a-pawn will be caught in that position.